Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Liverpool City Council's Virtual Planning Committee of the 26th of May. In terms of procedural announcements, I will shortly just verify members present can see and be heard on screen, and we'll then proceed into the items of business. We have a number of speakers for each item, who, as we get to each item in turn, the chair will call out names and they will appear on screen and have the opportunity to address committee. In terms of timings, agents and applicants are allowed up to 5 minutes. Objectors are allowed up to 3 minutes, and could I remind everyone present, when you are not speaking, to please keep your microphone on mute. In terms of apologies for absence, I have apologies from Councillor Steve Radford on this occasion, and with that in mind, I'm now going to therefore test everyone's connections. So first I'm going to bring Councillor Conception onto the screen. So Tony, if you could unmute your microphone and wait till you appear on screen, and just confirm you can see and hear us. Maybe a slight lag. If you could unmute yourself, please, Tony. Right, I will come back to Tony in a moment. We'll move on to Councillor Cummings. Dave.
All present and correct.
Dave, can you see and hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
But he's faint.
Unfortunately, on this occasion, I'm going to have to adjourn proceedings at this point. We have a 5 alarm in the Cllr building, therefore Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for that slight technical interruption of today's proceedings. It certainly makes life more eventful. In terms of where we're at in terms of procedure and process, I was going to check in terms of the IT to make sure all members can see and hear us. So Councillor Cummings should be on screen. Dave, if you can hear us, if you could unmute your mic and speak.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very clearly, Dave. You're not coming up in terms of visual, but hopefully that's just a time lag. I'll check to the other members now. Thank you, Dave.
I have Dave on visual.
Thanks, Trish. That's excellent. Councillor Doyle, you're a speaker for this meeting, but I'm going to check your feed anyway. Can you see and hear us okay?
Yeah, I can see everyone.
Thanks, Harry. Councillor Hanson, I'll put you on screen now. Just confirm you can see and hear us okay?
I can see you and I can hear you.
Thanks, Joe. That's brilliant. Councillor Lavelle, coming to you now. So if you just unmute your microphone while I put you on screen. Just bear with me. The tech is a little bit slow, as you can imagine. There you go. You should be coming on screen. Can you see and hear us okay, Anthony? That's excellent. Thanks, Anthony. Tricia, we know you're quite visible. We have other attendees as well. So Malcolm, I'm going to bring you on screen next. Can you see and hear us okay, Malcolm?
Yes, I can see and hear you fine, thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Malcolm. Just need to see if we can find Helen. Yes, there we are, Helen, and I'll bring Helen in. You can see and hear us there, okay, Helen?
Yes, I can see and hear you. It doesn't look like I'm on screen. Oh, CT, they've got me eyes right, I see.
Yeah, it's a time lag, Helen. It just we'll catch up shortly. But thank you. We can hear you quite clearly. Thank you. And I'll come to Myrna if Myrna's still on, hopefully. Just trying to find Myrna on our list. Myrna may well have left at this point, but we are quorate in terms of numbers of members. So with that in mind, I suggest we move on to our business, and we'll move first of all to item number 1, declarations of interest. Do our members have any interest to declare? If so, can you please unmute your microphone and declare and state the item concerned? None. In which case, we're going to item number 2, minutes of our last virtual meetings. There's 2 lots of minutes to consider for members today. Pages 4 to 22 of the agenda, which the public can also see, and those set out the minutes of our last 2 meetings as held on the 5th and the 12th of May. If anyone has any objections to those minutes or amendments, can you please unmute your microphone and state clearly at this stage? Otherwise, can I ask if the chair is happy to move those as agreed? No speakers indicated.
Can we agree the minutes as being a true record?
Can I ask members of the committee to collectively unmute their microphone and confirm your agreement?
Agreed.
Thank you. That's acceptable. I've got no urgent items of business to report today. So, Chair, with your agreement, I suggest we move on to item number 4, which is the land at Queen's Drive, Stoneycroft and Lexham Road in Notty Ash Ward. Pages 23 to 43 of the agenda sets out a detailed report on this item.
So, in order to consideration of this application, we will have a brief video tour around the site, following the routes which we would have taken if we had been able to have a site visit. The agent is also available to answer any questions once the video tour has concluded. And if the agent wishes, they've pre-registered so they can speak for up to 5 minutes. And then we will have 2 further speakers on this item, a local resident and chair of the Residents Association, and Councillor Harry Doyle.
Thank you, Chair. And before we bring in the video tour of the site, I think it's useful at this juncture to draw members' attention to some of the context for this particular application. As members may remember, this has previously been as an application to committee, our last consideration of this particular issue being on the 18th of February this year. at which you as members resolved to defer consideration of the application pending a site visit. Obviously, between then and now, we've seen the international and global issues over the coronavirus pandemic, which have resulted of social distancing requirements. We're no longer able to conduct site visits in a safe manner at present. Now, that throws up a number of procedural issues to the extent that whilst we've considered the application, the time limit as prescribed on the Town and Country Planning Acts continues to apply in terms of our requirement to determine applications. With this in mind, in the event that we continue to wait until the end of the current public health emergency, which at this stage the restrictions continue to apply, there is a risk that there may be an application for non-determination of this application, and that would remove the decision-making capacity from yourself as members of the committee and potentially remove the ability of us to comment and control it as a local planning authority in terms of determining the application. With that in mind, and also to note that site visits are obviously conducted in terms of a tour around the periphery of a site, but there's no opportunity on a site visit for members of the public or agents to actually speak. Therefore, in lieu of the site visit physically, what we've suggested is, and we've taken, is a full video showing the periphery of the site, which I'm going to bring onto screen now for everyone's attention. And obviously, if members consider that's appropriate information for you to determine the application, then you can continue to do so. Obviously, if you then decide that you still require a physical site visit, then you can still resolve to defer for that in the understanding that there may be an application for non-determination. With that in mind, I'm just going to ask my colleague to bring on screen the video and play it clearly.
Try again. Yeah, are you ready? Just
As you can now see on screen, we're now proceeding around the perimeter of the application site and the adjacent junction. So it's giving some visual context and cues as to the wider area and setting within which the application for this particular site may be seen. Just pan shots which take us to the positions as a committee you would have been taking during a physical site visit, so you can understand the context of how the site currently appears in terms of hoardings and how the site relates to the wider junction and area, and also to understand how the wider junction treatments are in terms of its proximity to traffic and vehicular movements, and also how the other similar corners of the junction have been treated in terms of previous developments and structures. As you can see, also the width of the pavement is quite clearly shown as well. And now we're proceeding to just have some different additional views of the application site. So this takes us to some of the adjacent roads, which would obviously see visual impacts are derived from the actual proposal, which normally during a site visit we would have walked down this particular road to assess the context, which is why we're doing this particular video to demonstrate what we would have undertaken in terms of a physical site visit. So it gives context of the adjacent properties and their scale and some concept in terms of the interface distances between the application site. And that concludes the video for this item of business.
Thank you for that, Mike. I think I lost a bit of contact with you for a while there, but I do know the site and I did see all the video of the actual site. So we now can invite questions or a comment for Simon Reed, who's here on behalf of the agent. So Simon, did you actually want to comment, or are you just here to answer any questions? Is Simon with us?
Simon is. Simon, if you could just unmute your microphone, please. Simon, if you can hear us, could you please unmute your microphone, just in case you want to make a few comments on the application? For the moment, I suggest we come back to Simon. I think in the interest of procedure, we do have 2 objectors also present today, which the chair can bring in if you're comfortable with that, Chair.
Yes, yeah. So I think we have Francis Warburton to speak, who's
Hello.
the lead chair of the Residents Association.
Yes, I am.
Would you like to carry on, Francis? You've got up to
Yes.
3 minutes.
Yes, I would. Thank you. This proposed building is on a major junction of Prescott Road and Queen's Drive. There is a pedestrian crossing within 5 yards of this proposed site. The estate has only 3 roads at which to access this estate, so this will result in more accidents on Queen's Drive, as this is one of the most busiest junctions in Liverpool. Hundreds of children going to school use this crossing on a daily basis, as do shoppers. A big building like this would be a major distraction for traffic using Queen's Drive, and traffic density will have a big impact on the small estate. The car park was an overflow for the estate and also on shoppers. It only became an eyesore when the developer put hoarding for advertising, which was stopping parking and caused vandalism. In the 30 years it has been a car park without any bother. We fought for residents parking for years, and now this very small road, Lexham Road, will now become a very small area for cars to park for 24 apartments. The impact that this will have on this area is unsafe for both pedestrians and motorists. I've checked the credibility of this company, and there have been no previous of large developments. How are they going to fund? This could be one of the many left in Liverpool standing empty, unoccupied. I've been on the website for Mayebridge. It was formed in 2019, and Company's House does not verify the accuracy of the information held. This is a great worry for the estate. We do have 2 hospitals in front and at the back of us, which these people still do park, and unfortunately they do get a lot of parking tickets. This is absolutely not, for the estate, it would be a major catastrophe, because for a building like this to be put on such a small car park is unbelievable. And how it can be passed, I really don't know. The people who live on this estate are they weren't even informed. The letters that were sent out, 300, I'm not saying they weren't sent out, but they were sent over to the other side of the estate, which is adjacent on the other side of Queen's Drive. And the people who live on that side of the estate, it wouldn't have had any impact on. The people who live in Lexham Road, who live in Ashcroft, are totally against this. I've spoken to numerous tenants and residents, and a lot of them elderly, and are really against this. As I say, the traffic density would be unbelievable. People do have off-road parking on some of the houses, and as you know, they tend to leave the cars on the road, and I think this is what will happen here. And what I don't understand is, it was really 24 apartments, 7 stories high. Then it's now 5 stories high, 24 apartments. It's now 4 stories high, 24 apartments. And either I'm stupid, or how do you put 24 apartments in 4 blocks high and put the same 24 apartments in 27 blocks high? Someone explain that to me, because I don't understand it at all.
Thanks for your comment, Francis. Do members of the committee have any questions for Francis at all? If so, can you please unmute your mic? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Doyle.
Yes, could I could I just ask a question to the residents?
I'll just bring you on,
Yes.
Dave. Just bear with us.
You okay to go?
Yeah, you can go now, Dave.
Right. Hi, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I just want to...
Francis.
Hi, Francis. I just want to make clear again something that you mentioned in your address. So you were talking about the developer and contacting the local residents, but they only gave out the information to the people on the other side of the road. And you mentioned the two roads, Lexham and what was the other one?
Ashcombe.
And the other one. And I'm assuming that's on your side where the development is. But you explained that you didn't receive any information. Is that
No.
so?
That's correct. No information. I've asked numerous people, knocked on doors and asked numerous people to show me the letters that they've received from this developer. And also nothing at all, nothing whatsoever. And when this developer spoke at the last meeting, he said his actual words were, me and a few of the guys got together.
Now, excuse me for coming in here as chair, but in
Yes.
actual fact, my reading from all the notes is that there's been 2 rounds of consultation. The developer does not need to actually consult. Some developers do. It's imperative that the planning department does the consultation. That has been done. When our planning officer comes on, I think he'll explain that in greater detail. But in the meantime, if your question's been answered, Councillor Cummings, I'd like to invite Councillor Harry Doyle to speak now.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring Councillor Doyle on screen now.
Thank you. With permission, can I just share a little presentation I've put together with some images? Yeah. Thank you. Right, okay. Well, thanks for letting me speak today, and hope everyone's safe and well in these weird times. They're just an outline of the reasons we're objecting to the proposal, but I want to focus on the first 2, which are the size and scale, and also the impact on the overlooking. So I just want to bring up this slide here. So I'm disappointed that the video actually didn't show the actual site itself. Obviously, it's all hoarded. I thought it might give you the opportunity to actually go in. But the application is for 24 residential units over 4 floors, and that's including 15 2-bedroom apartments. We don't believe that the size of the site can cater for what is being proposed, particularly when you consider the addition of parking space on the ground level. If I just move on again, you'll see here one thing that wasn't mentioned. You've obviously got the Highfield social club literally right next door to it. You can see the building there on the slide. It's extremely close proximity to the existing social club, and on completion would leave a narrow entry-like footpath at the main route into the club and through to East Prescott Road. We've had problems with drug dealing, and Francis will know, on the site too. And this enclosed dark space will make it much harder for the police to take action. The site was also the club's car park for a number of years, and I'm concerned about car parking, as Francis has already alluded to, particularly as the estate is now covered by the residence parking permit scheme. The view from East Prescott, that's just a view from East Prescott Road, and you'll see again, I've just circled there the actual space between the site and the building, the social club, that would be left dark and very narrow for passers-by, and obviously raises concerns about issues that we've had around ASB. Now, just on this view here, and again, it didn't really show you a full view of the surrounding and the properties. The proposed buildings in close proximity to residential homes, and as noted in the report, the interface distance does not meet recommendations as set out in SPD 10. This is explained on page 30 of the agenda, paragraph 4.2. I would ask the committee to look at this view here and seriously consider whether you think a 4-storey building is appropriate at this close distance to both residential properties and to the social club, completely blocking out the social club, I might add, as you can see on that screen. It'll no longer be viewable from the main road. The report also mentions of the amount of stories of the building. It says it should be 3 stories with a loft space. I can't actually see the proposal. Obviously, it's not been presented today, but from what I understand, that hasn't been followed through. That's on page 29. Just finally, then I'll sum up. On the 18th of February, as you already know, you deferred the application in order to conduct a site visit, and for obvious circumstances, that hasn't took place, and it's through no one's fault. I don't think that the video that you've been shown today is suitable, and I don't think it gives you a good view of the site. There are many residents who obviously would have liked to participate, as Francis was on today, but don't have the ways and means to actually use this technology, and they feel a bit let down that the site visit hasn't took place, again through no one's fault. But as a committee, you obviously shared concerns about the proposal back in February, and the question you now need to ask yourselves is, has this virtual meeting allayed your concerns from February? And with that, I'd strongly urge the committee to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'd
Councillor
like
Doyle.
to ask if there are any questions for Councillor Doyle. If not, can I hand over to our planning officer, John, please?
Chair, before bringing John, we now have the architect and agent available to speak.
Simon
so
Reid. Okay,
we'll
he
bring
can
those on
speak
screen.
now. Yes, please.
Yeah, could I ask Simon Reid a couple of questions, please?
Hello.
Hear from Mr. Reid first, Councillor
Okay.
Cummings, and then we'll bring you in.
Can everybody hear me?
We can do, Simon.
Okay. Listening to the comments just made, I think I'd still continue with the kind of brief statement I put together in support of the scheme this morning. This is the return to site of a proposal that, as we say, was heard at committee on the 18th of February, and it is a scheme for 24 apartments and 16 on-site car parking spaces. I would remind everybody that the final form of the proposals arrived at committee following an extensive consultation with the planning department and an extensive evolution of that scheme to show what we have today. And the proposals were brought to committee with a recommendation for approval. I know there were concerns raised, and obviously, we thought we had answered all the questions necessary, and the site visit was deemed to be appropriate to see what the context was. And I'm actually going to skip a bit because I was going to present scheme. I will say, I think, having listened to what's been said, that since the deferral, the applicant did commission a highways consultant. I think the primary concern at the time of the committee was highways and access, short term and long term. We advised the applicant, and he commissioned a survey by a highways professional to check out the issues that were raised at the time. I think the outcome of that report is kind of stronger than anything here, in that there is deemed to be no issue with access and no issue to safety of anybody locally as a result of the development. And I think it is a marked point that, in fact, the development going ahead is going to produce less traffic than actually using the thing as a surface car park. The current arrangement allows about 40 cars to get on that site, and the development is going to provide 16 on-site car parking spaces. I think those things really have answered all the concerns that are on the table about access to the site. So without covering any of the design issues, I think the development is actually well proportioned. It's well mannered. It sits well on a corner, a focus corner of the site. It respects the urban design and context. It respects heights of the street scene. We have debated this for a long time with the planning department. I think it is something that sits very comfortably in its site. It's a prime example of brownfield site redevelopment. It's a sustainable development, and it really fits all the policy aspirations of the City Council. And I think, therefore, it is an appropriate development for the site. And I think any concerns raised should be allayed by the production of a professionally produced report on highways and access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reid.
I'll invite questions now. I know Councillor Cummings had a question, but I don't know if it was for the agent or for the objectors.
Agent.
Okay, so carry on with your question, Councillor Cummings.
Thanks, Chair. I'll call you Steve, okay? Is that okay?
Simon.
So, can you just confirm that this development, this building will or will not be in line on in line of the shops or online with
The plan form of the development actually sits in almost replication of the other three corner sites. It is the Shamford building. It actually Prescott Roadside. It sits in line with the shops. The design work is intended to kind of break the elevation in that we know it's a lower scale in the shop run, but the building is actually set back but it does. The simple question is, does it sit in line with?
Right. So please, I'm just seeking more clarity on this.
There are.
Right. Okay. Councillor Doyle explained to us in regards to the social club at the back. How can you judge that very well?
I don't think justify is the right thing. I think that.
Do you consider it acceptable then?
I heard what was said about the issues of access and the possibility of it being social. I think that would be. I do actually, because it's the nature of the ownership. I would though say that I think the applicant, the applicant and owner, if there are concerns raised, he would address that. I think that is possible to close that opportunity to provide something that provides an entrance which is an acceptable, safe access to the social club.
Right. So would that be a change in the plan?
To me, at the moment, I would say I don't know the answer to that question. At the moment, I think the thing works okay. Injection.
Even
and I've had to download the app now. Able to participate. This cost. Yes. Yeah. Streets on. Are there any plans by highways? Do they understand that?
If we can ask our highways officers to address that once John Hayes, as case officer, has done a summary.
We'll get that answered by the highways officer. Are there any other planning committee members who want to speak now?
Yeah, I want to speak.
Just going to bring you on now, Anthony.
Thanks, man.
You're on screen now.
I think there's some certain opinions being expressed. So I just wanted to ask for further clarity following on from Councillor Cummings' contribution around the parking for one. Is it going to be communal space, so sort of first come, first served, or are they going to be allocated to certain apartments? And on the point of the alleyway, which is the access point to the social club, I can't see anything in the report from the police around antisocial behaviour, but is there any, maybe this is a question for the panel officer, has there been any further information which we haven't had sight of around concern in a particular area?
Address the planning case officer, if that's acceptable. Chair, Tricia, can you hear us? So, yeah.
Say was what the bar here. So I've got it back now. I'd like to invite our planning officer to speak now, please.
Thank
Can everybody hear me and see me? Chair, obviously Mike Jones, the committee clerk, has given a background in terms of the context of this case, insofar as to be able to get a flavour of its immediate surroundings. There's been questions asked about to perhaps just talk you through the scheme and then try and pick up on some of the points that have been raised by the objectors and by the questions from committee members. So obviously you've got a description of the development in your agenda papers, and just to pick up on the questions asked by Councillor Cummings, the building effectively covers a large, most of the overall site in terms of built form. It follows a U-shaped form. So if you can imagine where the shops are along East Prescott Road, the block comes out from there, follows the line of those buildings. Then on the return on Queen's Drive, the building continues, and then it returns again onto Lexham Road. So you get this U-shaped building block. As the architect has pointed out, you've got a chamfered corner on the junction between East Prescott Road and Queen's Drive, and that reflects the building on the opposite side, the large Wetherspoons building, and reflects the sort of open character on that major junction. In terms of the overall height of the building, it is 4 stories. You will again have seen from the photographs and from the video presentation that the buildings on East Prescott Road are 3-storey, and the architect did confirm correctly that the building is therefore higher than the surrounding buildings, particularly those on East Prescott Road. And obviously, as the objectors pointed out, the Highfield social club building is single-storey, and I'll come on to that relationship in a moment. So yes, the building is higher than those properties on East Prescott Road. Your officers in terms of making that assessment, considered that at an appropriate scale, particularly given some of the architectural some of the architecture involved in developing the scheme, such that the fourth floor is actually a mansard. So visually, the expectation is it doesn't read as such a dominant structure. In addition to that, I think your officers are happy with a four-storey building there because it's on a prominent corner location, and it's got very, very wide boulevards either side, both on the East Prescott Road side and on the Queen's Drive side. And for those reasons, we're satisfied that in visual terms, it's an appropriate scale. In terms of the relationship between the U Block and the social club, the Highfield Social Club, I do acknowledge the point raised by Councillor Doyle in terms of that relationship, and it will result in a path. However, I'm not aware of any representations made by Merseyside Police. Merseyside Police do get the weekly list of applications, and they're able to make comments as appropriate on those applications where they think it's necessary. But certainly, yes, it will produce a structure immediately adjacent to that passageway that leads to the social club. But nonetheless, I think your officers are satisfied that that is an acceptable relationship and one that can be supported. In terms of those other issues that have been raised by objectors, particularly around the loss of parking, again, as you've seen from the video and as you've heard in the presentation, the existing car park for which the site is used probably allows for around 40 spaces. The scheme is going to develop that, so there's clearly a loss of parking associated with that. But nonetheless, in terms of the parking provided by the scheme itself, the overall numbers would be less, providing for a total of 16 car parking spaces accessed off Lexham Road, and your officers are satisfied that that is an appropriate amount and would not give rise to problems of highway safety, both on Lexham Road or indeed on the East Prescott Road or Queen's Drive areas. In terms of a couple of the other points that were picked up, in terms of notification, there's been a very extensive notification. All the details of those who were notified are available on our web. I can't obviously confirm or otherwise how many of those have reached residents. I would hope that they all have. But certainly in terms of the statutory requirements, the extent of consultation goes way beyond the statutory minimum. And is far in excess indeed of your own code of conduct in relation to site notification and consultation. And then lastly, Chair, in terms of the applicant's particular details that was raised by the first speaker, obviously you're considering land use planning matters. The particulars of the company are not relevant to your consideration of the land use planning issues. So hopefully, Chair, that picks up on the various points that have been raised. Happy to answer any questions that you or other members may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions from members of the Planning Committee?
Yes, yeah.
Go ahead.
John, I just want to pick up on a couple of points with regard to the building that I mentioned next door to the social club and the small gap there around issues of potential ASB. Mm-hmm. And that cannot be denied in such a small gap. But there's another point to this. This is a social club, and as far as I can pick up on that imagery, is that the main entrance will be in that short alleyway-like entrance if this proposal goes forward. And with it being a social club, there'll be bands going in there, taking in all sorts of stuff from a band, and tables coming in and out to social activities. And I could not see that happening in such a small space into that club. There's another point about what you said about consultation, which I mentioned with Francis. Francis has told us that the streets on that side of the proposed development didn't get any consultation material. That I don't find that acceptable. And one last thing, with regard to the road, the residential road at the back where the social club is, I get the distinct impression that the building is far more higher at the back, which takes away the visuals and the sunlight coming into the people in that road.
So would you like to answer those points, please?
I'll do my best, Chair. Thank you. So in relation to the first point, I wonder if it's possible to go to the image of the site that Councillor Doyle presented on his presentation. That might help members try and understand the relationship of the building and the particular access concerns that Councillor Cummings has expressed. While we're doing that, and if we're not able to, I will try and pick up on the points. My understanding is that that is the existing access point for the social club, and so therefore the situation should not be any different from the current situation in terms of access to and from that existing building. What will change, Chair, is that you will then have, rather than having an open aspect, so there you can see it, Chair. That's an excellent picture. So there you've got the social club, Lexham Road, and there's an opening there with the roller shutter. What you can't perhaps see is the passageway along the side of that, which is just outside of the application boundary and obviously within the demise of the Highfield Social Club. So the development would again be a 4-storey block on that corner, and so it would present a physical presence against the existing structure of that social club. And I think that's what members are concerned about, is that that relationship provides a space which is currently open to a more enclosed space, and therefore that might lead to antisocial behaviour. I acknowledge those concerns, but I don't think they are insurmountable. I think that they are matters ultimately that can be addressed by the social club if there are issues. There's no reason in your officer's view why you can't have that physical relationship, a physical relationship between the social club and the wider development site. So that's in relation to the first point. In relation to the second point, Chair, around consultation, I can only reiterate what I said earlier, is that I'm satisfied that sufficient consultation has been undertaken on both occasions, i.e. when we got the first application and on the second round of consultation. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the overall amount that we consulted, but it is far in excess of those that we have are required to do under statutory requirements. And then I've forgotten the last point, Chair, apologies. Councillor Cummings, can you remind me what the last question was?
The last point was on the residential road at the back.
Yes, I beg your pardon, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Cummings. It was about the scale of the building. Yeah. And again, if we perhaps go back to that slide, again, we'll get an understanding of the overall scale and its relationship to the surrounding properties. So, yeah, so if we've got another slide, which we had before. So you can see the properties there, Chair, on East Prescott Road. They're 3 stories. The overall height of the building will be another story over that, and that building would wrap around. You can see from that slide the relationship with some of the buildings on the opposite side of Lexham Road, and again, they're 2-story in scale with a pitched roof. Again, your officers are happy with the size and scale of the overall building, given where it sits on the site, given the context in terms of the wider street. Setting.
Yes. Are there any questions?
Yes, can I ask you a question?
Yes, carry on, Malcolm.
The questions are fairly brief, but to be clear, what was the use of the site before it was a car park? It looks very much like a brownfield site to me that has been used for something else. Was the social club there then when it had its previous use? And is the gap or the alleyway that's created overlooked by the police?
Can I answer that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. The short answer is we've tried to investigate that ourselves, and we've not been able to ascertain the previous. I think not been able to glean what was on that view. So again, it is likely that it was a similar form to the buildings on the opposite corner, which is the Wetherspoons, and my guess is that it is of a similar height and scale in the past. I'm not sure whether the applicant architect has got any information, if he's able to answer that, Chair.
I am here.
Come back in here. I don't know if you would.
Can I ask-
No.
Hello.
Hello, Simon. Do you have any information?
I think the only thing that
This use was.
I think it would be uncertain, but given the nature of the investigation, we think it was either a car garage, petrol station, or something similar.
Yeah.
Well, if I may come in here, that was my reading when I read the agenda, that it had previously been a petrol station on this corner. And then after that, it's been used as a car park, but I presume that was an interim use, a temporary use, and maybe not agreeable to whoever owned the land at the time, but I'm not sure about that. Are there any other points from members of the planning committee? Does anybody from the officers want to add a further comment, for instance, from highways?
Yeah, Mike, am I on?
Yes,
Just trying to bring you on now, Andy. Yeah, thanks.
Say something, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. Just to pick up on a few of the points that were made there. First of all, Councillor Conception's point about the junction. Just to let you know, on the southbound approach to that junction, there's actually 3 sets of lane markings in advance of the junction. I'm not aware that there's any plans to change the layout of that junction, but I can certainly raise those concerns with colleagues in traffic management and ask them to take a review of the junction and see if there's any further signage that could be introduced. I think it's difficult to see how this development and the traffic associated with it would exacerbate any existing issues whereby drivers travelling along Queen's Drive would find themselves in the wrong lane. Just on some of the other points that were raised by the objectors, the pedestrian crossings, again, I find it difficult to see how the development would make the crossings at this junction unsafe. The building itself won't be any more of a distraction to drivers when compared to, for example, the numerous advertisements that were displayed on this site for a number of years. So I can't see that the impact of this development on the safety of the crossings would have any effect. Traffic generation, again, you could argue that 30 or 40 space car park, that could generate as much, if not more, vehicular traffic movements than 16 car parking spaces associated with the flats. The existing access arrangements with Queen's Drive would remain the same, so it's a left in only and a left out only onto Queen's Drive, so again reducing conflicting vehicle movements. And again, car parking, 16 car parking spaces is provided for the 24 flats, and we feel that this is an appropriate level of car parking given the highly accessible location, and it's on a key bus corridor as well, which gives people the option of travelling by sustainable modes, also with cycle parking included within the site. And just one final point on the access way. Just to let you know that the access way doesn't form part of the public highway. It's privately owned and presumably falls within the demands of the social club. So if they felt it was suitable to do so, they could easily put access controls in the form of a gate on that passageway without the need to get any permissions from ourselves. So, thanks, Chair.
any other questions? So
Can I just make one comment?
yes, come in, Helen, now.
Okay.
Carry
I'm
on.
on the screen. Yeah, well, I mean, many years ago, I used to be the councillor for that particular ward when it was known as Broad Green. And that particular estate, Lexham and Cllr, they were all subject to rat runs, and that's the reason why there was barriers introduced to stop rat runs on that particular estate. Although Lexham Road could still be used as a rat run, really, to evade the lights at the top of East Prescott Road and Queen's Drive. So I think members should be aware of that. I don't know whether other measures can be introduced to sort of look at that. But obviously, on that particular junction, the point I was trying to make is that on Queen's Drive, when those lights are on green, you get vehicles in the near side lane that should really be in the middle lane to go straight across. And then they accelerate to get ahead of traffic so that they can go straight across. And that was the point I just wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I was fairly clear about that. I think that you were making a bid that, you know, if it could be corrected, it should be looked at. But I don't think that hugely impinges on this application, if I may say so. But I want to move that this recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Chair, before we move to the voting stage, as members of the committee and public present will clearly appreciate, we appear to be experiencing some technical difficulties in terms of video feeds. In order to actually conduct votes formally in accordance with the regulations, I do require to be able to see as well as hear individual members. Therefore, at this juncture, I will attempt to start the vote, but if I cannot see one or more of the members at this stage, I will ask my colleague Niall to suspend the live feed, and I will ask members to adjourn proceedings and then to leave and rejoin the meeting, and we will attempt to reconvene within the next 5 to 10 minutes, if that's acceptable to members. But before we move to the vote, do any members wish to move any amendments, please?
Well, then we'll proceed to vote, Mike, and we will see whether we can get the visuals as well as the audio. But I'm assuming that as long, well, no, I don't know what will happen if there's one person we can't get a visual on. I don't know if it doesn't actually affect the overall majority. We might be able to accept the vote, but I'd take your advice on that.
At this point, Chair, procedurally, we do appear to be having quite significant issues in terms of the video stream. Therefore, unless any member wishes to move an amendment, which would need to be duly seconded, I'm going to move to the vote. So if someone does wish to move an amendment, please, clearly. Councillor Cummings, I'll bring you on screen, or attempt to at least. Go on, would you like to move your amendment, please, Dave?
I would like to propose an amendment and request a site visit. It is feasible for a site visit. We can social distance and we can view it at the site. There is no reason not for us to have a site visit at this moment. We can social distance. 3 members of the committee can go on one time. Another 3 members can go on another time. It's easily feasible for us all to go there and have a look. So I'm making an amendment for a site visit.
Councillor Cummings, before I seek a seconder to that amendment, just to confirm, if a site visit is conducted, obviously we have to comply with the current social distancing regulations as under the requirements of the Coronavirus Act and government national restrictions. Any site visit conducted has to be conducted with all voting members of the committee present at that point in time together. And as you will know, there are specific restrictions in place on public gatherings in terms of numbers, which is the whole purpose of having the regulations for such meetings. Whilst your amendment is acceptable, it will have to be done en masse in terms of the whole of the committee, and in the recognition, as stated at the start of proceedings, that under the current regulations, our ability to conduct site visits is restricted, which may impact on the time and delay until such time as we will undertake such a site visit. With that in mind, is there a seconder to that amendment, please? Any seconder? In which case the amendment falls. Now, in terms of the actual chair's resolution, in the absence of any other further amendments, we therefore will conduct a vote on that. And alphabetically, first of all, I will come to Councillor Cummings. I'll bring you back on screen, Dave. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Thanks, Dave. What's your vote in terms of the chair's resolution? For, against, or abstain?
I do not support this application.
That's against. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Dave. Note that Dave is not visible on screen, and at this point I'm going to attempt the remaining members. If other members are not visible at this point, I'm going to adjourn proceedings and cease the live feed. So as long as members are aware of that. So I'll just take Dave off and we'll come to Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, could you unmute your mic?
You hear me?
I can hear you, Joe, but we can't see you.
Yeah, it's a blessing to some people.
Couldn't possibly comment, Dave. What's your vote, Joe?
My vote is for the recommendation.
Thanks, Joe. Right, we'll try Councillor Lavelle next. Again, not visible on screen, but Anthony, can you hear us? What would be your vote?
For the recommendation.
Thanks, Anthony. Billy, I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, okay, Michael.
Yeah, we can hear you. What will be your vote, Billy?
Okay, I'm against.
Thanks, Billy. Just bear with me while I unpin Anthony and Billy. I'll come to Councillor Kennedy next.
Hello?
Councillor Kennedy, I'm just going to bring you on screen now. Just bear on me one moment. Malcolm, can you see us and hear us? Malcolm, we can see you. Come on.
Yeah, I can hear and see you well. My vote is for.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm. Next, we'll come to Councillor Lavelle, if we may. Anthony, could you unmute your mic? Okay, thank you.
So I'm still in favour of the recommendation.
Okay. In which case, we'll come to Councillor Juarez, if I can find you on my list.
Can you hear me?
We can do, man. I'm just going to try and bring you on screen. Go on, man. We can go ahead. You're not on screen, though.
I am voting for the application today.
Thanks, Myrna. Just going to bring Councillor Thompson in, if you bear with me. Councillor Thompson, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can, and I'm voting for.
Thank you. And I believe that takes us to our final voting member, which will be the chair, Tricia. Thanks, Trish. Now, as members will be able to clearly hear as opposed to see, the majority of those votes I'm not accepting as valid on the basis that whilst I can hear you, I cannot see you to be able to confirm your participation. Therefore, at this stage and in recognition of the technical difficulties, I am asking my colleague in digital to suspend with immediate effect the live stream of proceedings, and I would ask members of the committee to adjourn for up to 5 minutes and ask you to log off and log back and achievements at this point in time?
Sorry, yeah, I've been I haven't had my camera on because I've just been observing and going back and forth with Microsoft.
Okay, so I'm waiting for everyone to come back on, and I very much appreciate everyone's patience. As you can appreciate, the technology is very fickle, and it's obviously not quite caught up with where we need to be. So thank you, members, thank you, officers, thank you to agents, applicants and public. I very much appreciate your patience while we try and get things back on track. Got a few more people still to join us again, and then I will Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies and thank you for your patience whilst we've experienced a few technical difficulties. We're going to continue with our first item of business in respect of land Queen's Drive, Stoneycroft, and the corner of Lexham Road in Notty Ash Ward. At this juncture, the resolution and vote will be chaired at this point by the Deputy Chair due to technical difficulties for the participants. So with that in mind, Councillor Thompson, would you like to reaffirm the Chair's original motion?
Yeah. Thank you. I move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you. Just for purposes of clarity, we previously had an amendment moved by Councillor Cummings, which was not seconded. The substance of Councillor Cummings' amendment at that point in time was to defer the application pending a socially distanced site visit. That amendment wasn't seconded, therefore a vote will not be conducted because I've required it to have a seconder. We'll therefore revert to the Deputy Chair's motion, and I'm going to ask members in turn to vote on that motion. So first of all, in sequence around the tiles on screen, Councillor Kennedy.
Have you got me?
Yep.
My vote is for.
Councillor Conception, if you'd unmute your microphone. If I could try, Councillor Hanson, we'll come to you now.
Oh,
Thanks, Joe. Councillor Kennedy, I'll come to you shortly. Just trying to get you on screen. We've done you already. Councillor Cummings. Councillor Cummings, please.
I'm on screen.
You should be coming on screen now. Just could carry on speaking, Councillor Cummings.
Yes, I'm not on screen, but I'm in.
Okay, that's fine. Just to confirm, Councillor Conception isn't voting as I indicated earlier because he wasn't present for the whole item. Our next voting member will be Councillor Juarez. I'll just put you on screen, Myrna. In fact, Myrna, you're there. Can you see and hear us okay?
I can see everybody else.
That's fine. What's your vote, please, Myrna?
My vote is for.
Thank you, Myrna. Bring Councillor Marat. Billy, if you could unmute your microphone.
Oh, Michael, yes, my vote is against.
Okay, thank you, Billy. Councillor Lavelle, you're on.
My vote's for.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavelle. Checking to make sure we have everyone present on our list as far as we can. At this point, in terms of the members present, that will conclude the voting in terms of those who were able to vote. The vote being 4 in favour and 2 against, and the recommendation being carried on that basis. Deputy Chair, are you happy for us to proceed on to the next items of business?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Item number 5, therefore we'll move straight on to, is rail land to the south of Fazakerley Station at Longmoor Lane, Liverpool 9 in Fazakerley Ward. We have no speakers for this particular item of business, but I would ask my colleague to display some images on screen, please, which shows the development site. On screen, we have a visual showing approximate location of the new mast and the existing cables. You can now see some overhead shots as well as a video showing the line side location and indicating as to where the proposed mast will be installed. And again, we can see some more detailed diagrams showing the nature and positioning of the mast and cabinets adjacent to the line side, and In this current slide, you have a detailed visual showing how the mast will be structured and its height and scale, and that's a helpful diagram in terms of showing its scale relevant to a typical person. At this juncture, can I ask our case officer, John Hayes, to unmute his microphone and to come back on screen, please? John, you can hear us okay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. Again, can everybody hear and see me?
Yeah.
Excellent. I don't actually have any additional comments to make over and above what's in the report. Members are very familiar with this type of proposal. Just to remind the committee that this is one of a number of applications that have been submitted as part of the communication system required by Merseyrail. A number have been granted. Given its location, given its size, your officers are happy that it would not have an adverse impact in terms of its visual amenity. Issues around health and so on, again, as this committee is very familiar, are not ordinarily matters to be considered, provided that they have signed all the relevant paperwork. So happy to answer questions, Chair, but I don't wish to say anything further.
Do members have any questions at all, please?
Yes, I have one actually.
Thank you, Helen. Helen, just unmute your microphone, please.
Sorry, I muted myself again
No
inadvertently.
problem at all. Thank you.
I just wondered what the rationale was for moving the site slightly further south than the initial plan that we saw.
John, if you want to put that issue, please, if you can.
Bear with me, Chair. I'm not entirely sure. I suspect it's being done at the request of the applicant for technical reasons. Just bear with me. Yeah, I think it's been done for technical reasons, Chair. I don't think there's any particular requirement that's come from your officers in relation to the siting. But the short answer is I'm not entirely sure. So apologies.
Thank you. Anyway, does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Do I move to the vote or?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. If you are comfortable with our discussions on the application to date and you're happy to move a resolution on it, then please do so, if you can.
So I move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll take your vote first, if I may. Are you for or against?
I'm for it.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lavelle, if you could unmute your microphone, please.
I'm for, Chair, Mike.
Can you make sure your camera's active as well, Anthony?
It is, yeah. I'm in the bottom corner.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Juarez, we'll take you next, if we may, please.
I am for the application.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Councillor Marat.
Yeah, I'm for, Michael.
Thank you, Billy. Councillor Cummings.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Conception.
For.
Councillor Hanson.
For.
Thanks, Joe. Councillor Kennedy.
My vote is for.
Thank you, Malcolm. And that, I believe, is those members present at this stage. Therefore, it's a unanimous vote and the application is carried on that basis. With that on mind, we'll move on to our next item of business, agenda item number 6, relating to the southern footway of Walton Beck Road, close to the junction with Houlding Street, Liverpool 4 in Anfield Ward. Now, again, for this item of business, we don't have any speakers, either agents, applicants, or objectors. However, I believe we do have some images, which I'm going to ask my colleague to display on screen now to assist us in terms of consideration of the application today. That should be coming on screen now. I'm asking my colleague to advance one slide. And we now have an overhead view showing the approximate location of the site. That, I'm afraid, on this occasion is the limit of the imagery we have available. If I could ask our case officer, John Hayes, to comment a little bit further, if he could. Ask my colleague to stop sharing his screen as well.
Again, Chair, thank you. The issues, again, are very familiar to this committee around telecommunications equipment. The proposal is as described in your agenda papers. Your officers are happy with the overall scale of the structure, particularly given its commercial backdrop, and is of the view that it would not have a harmful impact in terms of the wider visual amenity of the area. And again, Chair, in terms of health matters, the structure is considered acceptable in terms of public health, having regard to the various certification provided through the application process. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, John. At this juncture, can I welcome back the chair of the committee who rejoined at the start of this item, so is able to participate again. And Tricia, if you'd like to seek any comments.
Are there any questions from members of the planning committee?
Yeah, I have a question, Trish.
Yes, carry on, Billy.
Okay, John, is this a new mask completely?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because we've been getting, as you know, through emails and everything, we've been getting letters or emails from this company that are proposing to put them in place. And they asked us for our feedback. They asked us if we wanted any information. And very little information is coming through at all about these masks. We've objected, John, as councillors, because it's in a built-up area, and we're just not happy that we can't get any more. We know procedure, what you've told us, that generally they're safe and all that, like, but we cannot get any feedback at all from this company once they put an email out to local councillors saying, have you any queries, feedback or whatever. So I will be voting against John.
Thank you, Councillor Mallock. Just before I bring John Hayes in again, Councillor Mallock, can you confirm, you stated that you as ward councillors have objected to this application?
As I'm aware, Michael, we have.
Have you personally, as a local ward councillor, objected to this? In which case you won't be able to vote on this item concerned because you've expressed a previous opinion. So just please note that. But your comments can be taken into account. And John, if you could please pick those issues up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the application process, clearly your officers try and consult a wider area as possible in relation to these applications. We are very mindful of the concerns that these types of proposals generate. There are quite a number of applications that have been submitted in and around the Anfield area, but also in many other parts of the city as part of the 5G rollout. This is not part of the of that particular rollout. It's a different company. It's clearly frustrating for members if they're not getting provided the information. Certainly when we do get an application, we are asking applicants to provide CGIs wherever possible, but actually we can't insist on that in terms of validating and progressing the application. So your officers are trying to work with the telecommunications company to provide you as members and residents within areas with all the necessary information and to provide as full as package of information as possible. But as I say, Chair, we can't insist on that. We can't refuse the application for lack of information, provided the basic plans are required, which has been done in this particular case. Happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I've got a question.
Councillor Thompson has a question. Carry on, Helen.
It's just clarification on what exactly we're deciding here, because I see it says to be noted as having prior approval given, and there's an explanation on page 57 in the reports pack, but I don't really understand that either. What are we agreeing or not agreeing?
Okay, Chair, thank you. This is slightly different to the normal telecommunications you get from the likes of EE and so on, and O2. this is a company that is a broadband provider, and a lot of what it does is via cable, but it also has a requirement for telecommunications coverage as well. So what the report is trying to explain to you is that ordinarily the poles on which the fibres are provided are permitted development. They do not require any form of planning permission. In this particular case, because there is telecommunications equipment erected upon it, in addition to the cables themselves, it requires planning permission. So you are approving the structure in its totality. Does that help? I think what we were trying to say in the report, Chair, is that there are a lot of different types of structure that can be erected under permitted development, irrespective of their impact, both in visual terms and in terms of sort of wider public health. And we just tried to give you that context in considering this particular application. So the scheme is for the totality of the structure, so the pole and the telecommunications equipment on it, but against the background that a pole of itself without the antenna could be erected under permitted development. Hope that helps clarify for you all.
Chair, can I come in with a question?
Carry on, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Chair. John, just to add on to that from the previous Councillor Thompson, you've answered the question as best you can. So, okay, I accept that. I don't have the notes with me. I don't have any of the planning notes with me. So this is the reason for my question. How many objections have there been to this planning application?
2 from the agenda papers, Chair.
2. Could I ask Councillor Marriott a question as well, please, if it's possible?
To be honest, Councillor Cummings, this is not the usual way that we carry on. I mean, we don't normally have councillors directly asking questions. Can you say what your question is? And then I'll direct it to Councillor Marriott if I think appropriate.
Fine. It's just the same question which I've asked John.
So, Councillor Marriott, have you had any more than the 2 objections?
Not really, Trish, no.
No. Okay. And I'd like to make it clear as chair over these issues that, of course, we have the assurance of the Non-Ionising Radiation International Health and Development Committee that these structures are safe. And I would say that unless we've really got evidence to prove to the contrary, this is an expert body that we are talking about here. So if there are no other comments, I'm going to move to the vote now. Is there anybody else? All right, so can I move that this recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take your vote first, please, if I may.
I agree.
Thank you, Trish. Moving on to Councillor Thompson, if you could unmute your microphone and confirm your vote.
I agree.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Juarez, could you confirm your vote?
I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, if you could confirm your vote, please. Thank you. Councillor Cummings, if you could confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Councillor Conception.
Oh.
Thank you. Councillor Lavelle.
Oh.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Oh.
Thank you. Councillor Marriott, as I previously indicated, cannot vote on this, having previously expressed an opinion. Therefore, those members able to vote, the decision is unanimous in favour of the application. The application is agreed on that basis. With that in mind, we move now to item number 7 in respect of numbers 14 to 20 Stanley Street, Liverpool 1 in Central Ward. We do have the agent present on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Mason. I'm going to ask my colleague to put on screen a presentation and some images, and I would ask Brian to speak to the presentation once that appears on screen. So Brian, if you'd like to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Well, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Very surreal circumstances, but understandably so. My name is Brian Mason. I'm the planning agent for the application before you today at 14 to 20 Stanley Street, Liverpool City Centre, which is also accompanied by a listed building application, which is 19L2855. My client is Orchid Secured Capital Limited. Your officer's report is well balanced and explains all of the material facts of the application with a recommendation to this committee for approval subject to the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement. The application provides for carrying out internal and external alterations for the change of use of numbers 18 to 20 Stanley Street, which is currently 11 apartments, and 14 to 16 Stanley Street, which is currently part office space and storage, overall to 49 serviced apartments. Next slide. There have been a number of various applications over the years, and this application now regularises those approvals with one comprehensive scheme over the two buildings, whilst retaining the existing fabric of the buildings, and which does not detract from the architectural and historical interest of the listed building. It also importantly brings back into use a large proportion of vacant parts of the upper floors of these buildings. You'll also note the importance of conservation and heritage that from your officer's report in point 2.5, that the enhancements proposed for Progress Lane elevation in particular represent an improvement to the listed building. Next slide. The Council's Conservation and Heritage Officer had some initial concerns with the scheme as proposed. However, through careful and proactive discussions with your officers, we were able to alter the scheme accordingly with the loss of some units to accommodate those concerns, which related to the likes of the retention of a warehouse-style typology of the existing building. The officer is now satisfied and supports the scheme. Your urban design, environmental health, highways, and indeed your planning case officers now satisfied with the scheme as amended and recommends approval of the scheme subject to the provision of a Section 106 legal agreement. The application has been submitted full regard to the policies of the current development plan, emerging plan and national government guidance. Your officer's report confirms that the scheme conforms to the criteria set out in these policies and that the principle of development is clearly acceptable. The proposed use of the building for serviced accommodation is acceptable and represents compatible land use, enhancing the varying and current accommodation on offer in an accessible location with benefits to the local economy. The development does not impact adversely on surrounding land uses or the buildings, and the scale and design of the scheme relates well to the surrounding historic environments and will offer a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area. A number of planning conditions have been attached to the case officer report to control the specific details of the scheme, including those that I mentioned earlier, and those are obviously including glazing, mechanical ventilation and cycle storage. In conclusion, I'd respectfully ask the committee to consider the well-balanced and thorough case officer report before you today and approve the recommendation therein. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Malcolm, I believe you would like to ask a question.
No.
Carry on, Malcolm.
I'm fine, I said, no problem. So, no questions.
All right. So can I hand over to our planning officer if there are no questions for Brian Mason? Would you carry on then, Fergal?
Okay, Chair, thank you very much. Fergal McAvoy, Team Leader for Development Management Team. Chair, you've got a detailed report in front of you for consideration today, and you've also listened to detailed and informative presentation from the agent who has summarised all the issues, the amendments that have been made at the request of Heritage Officer to make the scheme compatible, which have addressed the concerns that we initially had in relation to the application. In terms of residential amenity, principle of use, heritage concerns, we are comfortable with this application. It will bring two buildings, well, it will bring one building back into reuse that's currently used for office accommodation, and will convert an existing residential building into another form of residential use. We're satisfied that proposal for short stay apartments in this location is an appropriate use, and the officer's recommendation is for approval subject to Section 106 agreement. Chair, thank you.
Are there any questions for our planning officer?
Yes, I have a question.
Councillor Thompson.
I just wondered what the reason was that there's no contribution under Section 106, no contribution required in lieu of public open space.
Can I ask you to answer that, Fergal, please?
Yeah, the contribution is in relation to street trees, is my understanding, Councillor Thompson. For every 1,000 square metres of floor space, there is a requirement for one street tree, which is equivalent of £4,000. And I think I haven't got the full report in front of me, but it's my understanding that's what the sum of approximately £9,700 relates to.
Okay, so it's contribution for trees, but nothing for public open space?
No, Councillor Thompson, contribution for public open space relates to residential apartments, which is within a C3 use. This is more akin to short stay apartments, a kind of variation on a typical kind of Airbnb stroke hotel operation. We don't have a policy in relation to kind of offsetting requirement of £2,000 per residential unit in respect of open space. The charge for these type of uses only relates to street trees and associated legal costs.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the Planning Committee? So I want to move that the recommendation as amended be approved. Is that agreed? Mike, I'm handing over to you to do the votes.
Thank you, Chair. I've just unmuted my microphone. If I can take members in sequence as I can see them on screen. So starting with Councillor Thompson, your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Conception. Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Agree.
Thank you, Mona. Trish, your vote, please. Can see you on screen.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Lavelle, I'm going to put you on screen, or attempt to at least. Just unmute your mic.
Agreed.
Thanks, Anthony. Billy, I'm going to bring you on screen now. Billy, unmute your mic, please. Oh, Billy, there you are. Thank you. Councillor Hanson. Thank you, Joe. Just to confirm the vote on that item, it is unanimous and the application is therefore approved on that basis, and we move now to item number 8 in respect of land at Rutter Street, Liverpool 8 in Riverside Ward. Over to you, Chair.
Can I ask, well, we don't have somebody for the agent. We don't seem to have any objectors. So I'd like to hand straight over to our planning officer, please.
Thank you, Tricia. If I can ask my colleague to display some images and visuals to assist the committee with consideration, so that the case officer can also talk to those as well. It's coming on screen now. That's on screen for everyone's attention now.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Clark here, team leader of the South team. Can everybody hear and hear me and see the images on the screen?
We can, thanks, Stuart.
Good stuff. If you could progress, there's an aerial photograph. Brian, if you could go to that would be helpful. Can we go to the aerial photograph?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're after, Stuart?
No, it's not that one. There's a high level aerial one.
We only have the overview of the site based on the slides available, Stuart. So,
right. Okay. There was one put in the folder. It's okay. As you can see from the site, it's a bit of vacant, derelict land. As you'll see from your papers, a consent for an identical scheme was granted in 2013, which just lapsed and never got implemented. This is a resubmission of that same scheme. The only difference, Chair, from the last time when it was resolved and this time is that, as you can see from the images in front of you, there's a new estate that's being built that was allowed on appeal in 2014, sorry. In terms of the impact on those occupiers, there is a small pinch point of 1.5 metres below our normal standards of 26 metres for a 3-storey block. However, we're satisfied that 24.5 metres is still a sizable distance in this particular part of the world, and also that there's a regen benefit from bringing this derelict site back into use. The scale of the buildings are consistent with others. There's a 15-storey tower block to the right, if you look on the screen that you've got before you now. Sorry, if you can go back one. That's it. So immediately to the right of the red line, that's a 15-storey tower block. And then directly to the north, you can't see it, but that's all 3-storey. So the scale and massing of the buildings are in keeping with the locality. There's not much else I can ask, Chair, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Question.
Yes, Councillor Thompson.
I just wanted to check, I think I know the answer to this, but let me just ask, if Landworst Close was included in the consultations, and I'll tell you, the reason I'm asking is that's a pinch point. That's one of the older properties, I believe. That's a pinch point, and the notes say that there's an assumption that the windows on that side in Landworst Close are non-habitable, but I would like to know either that there's confirmation that they're non-habitable or that the people who live there did actually receive notification.
Yeah, I don't have the file in front of me, Chair, Councillor, but the Landworst Close was notified, as they were last time, and there's a condition proposed that any windows in that elevation obscurely glazed anyway, so there's no overlooking.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Same procedure as last time. I'll take your vote first, Chair. Are you in favour of the application?
I agree to it.
Thank you. Moving now to Councillor Marat, who's appeared. Are you in favour or against or abstaining? Councillor Marat?
Oh, Michael.
Thank you, Billy. Councillor Cummings, could you unmute your microphone, please?
Yes, unmuted, please.
Just confirm your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Conception?
Well,
Councillor Juarez?
agree.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle?
Agreed.
Thank you. That vote is therefore unanimous and the recommendation is carried on that basis. We now move on to our next item of business, which is number 9 on today's agenda. The land bounded by St James Street, Norfolk Street and Brick Street, Liverpool 1 in Riverside Ward. For this particular application, we have the agent present and registered to speak on behalf of this application, Mr. Malthouse, and we also have some presentation visuals. So I'd ask at this stage for my colleague to display the presentation on screen and for Mr. Malthouse to unmute his microphone, then we should be able to see and listen to his contributions.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Malthouse. Carry on.
Right, thank you. It's only a brief presentation because it's a re-application. Phil Malthouse from Brockhouse Michael Architects, acting on behalf of Crossfield, who in turn are developing the scheme for Taurus, which are part of LMH. The first slide you'll see is the location of the site, which I think you'll all be familiar with, which is St James Street with Norfolk Street and Brick Street to either side of it. The site has commenced in terms of some groundworks based on the original application, which is 18F/2835. Next slide. Sorry, I can't see the slides. Are we on the next one?
We were on the next one, yes. We've gone forward and back now. We're now on to the second slide again.
Okay. Slide 2 locates the site. You can see phase 1 is currently on site, which is a residential development for Crossfield Construction. Phase 2 is the hotel that's coming forward, and phase 3 is on St James Street, which has now been redesigned to fit the needs and purposes of Taurus and LMH. Next slide. The scheme has remained the same scale and mass as the original approval. We've got commercial units at ground floor. We've had to increase the plant facilities for sprinklers and servicing of the building, but have retained commercial units as per the original scheme. Next slide. Each floor has an office use, a B1 office use to the rear. We've enhanced this by adding some windows. The original scheme had no windows in the offices. We've also increased the number of apartments to include more 2-beds, which again is in line with the client requirements. Final slide. We've had further dialogue with the planning officer, enhanced the design so it sits with the street elevation more. The materials we've discussed at length, with the introduction of some screen clouds in the ground floor to highlight the commit, and some chain of brick at first floor, which creates a bit more identity and breaks up the building. Thank you very much. Here to answer questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, carry on, please.
I just wondered how the proposed height of this building would compare to the Siren building on the other side of Norfolk Street.
It's different in form, obviously, because next door is office buildings, but it's all I can say at this stage is that the building is the same scale and height and mass as the approved application from November of last year.
Sorry, I wasn't asking about the height compared to the other buildings on that site, not phase 1 or phase 2. The height of the building, I think it's on the other side of Norfolk Street. It's got the Siren Cafe in the bottom.
Oh yeah, I understand which building you mean. I don't have a comparison because we were reduced to 5 slides. But as I said, this scheme has a planning approval from November, and it was approved based on the height then, so we haven't changed it.
So I will ask the planning officer to comment on Councillor Thompson's point as well. I think you're talking about the women's organisation building, Councillor Thompson. Are there any other questions from members of the planning committee for Mr. Malthouse? No? So can I hand over to our planning officer, please? Thank you, Mr. Malthouse.
Chair, thank you very much. This proposal is to make amendments to a residential scheme that was previously considered by yourselves back in November of last year. Planning permission was previously granted for a Part 7, Part 9 and Part 10 storey building with 56 residential apartments on the upper floors and 980 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor. The site has been acquired by Taurus and Liverpool Mutual Homes, so it's a variation. So the number of apartments would increase by 6 to 64 apartments, and the commercial floor space would reduce in size by approximately 160 square meters. In relation to Councillor Thompson's query, I think the Women's Centre next door is probably, it's a modern building. If memory serves me correct, it's approximately 6 stories in height. The building that's under consideration by yourselves today is higher than that. I said, where it faces St. James's Street, it's up to 10 stories in height. However, I would reiterate what was said previously in the presentation. The scheme that you previously recommended for approval back in November last year, there are no, as part of this application, there's no proposals to increase the height, scale or massing of the building. What is proposed is kind of minor amendments to the materials and also internal reorganisation of the accommodation layout. The application previously considered issues of principle and development, the overall design and scale of the building, access and traffic issues relating to residential amenity, the relationship between the proposed development and the residential properties on the opposite side of St. James's Street. As officers, we're satisfied that what is for consideration today does not raise any other issues that were previously considered by yourselves back in November. The applicants are proposing a full Section 106 contribution, and this scheme is supported by your officers and recommended for approval, subject to suggested conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Chair, happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Are there any questions? Well, in that case, we did already approve this, and I believe that we were quite happy about the materials on that last occasion. And I'd like to comment again that it does look very suitable in its style for the Baltic Triangle area. So can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. We'll take you in sequence first, if I may, because you're on screen. Can you give any vote?
Agree.
Thank you, Chair. Next, Councillor Thompson, if you could unmute your microphone, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Conception. Thank you, Tony. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, can you hear us? Councillor Marrett.
Agreed.
Thank you. The vote therefore in the absence of Councillor Hanson, that is 80 in favour, none against, no abstentions, and therefore the recommendation is approved on that basis. And we'll now move on to our next item of business, number 10 on today's agenda, relating to number 72 St John's Road, Liverpool 20 in Kirkdale Ward. We have no speakers registered either for or against this particular application, but I would again ask my colleague to display some images to assist colleagues, and I would ask the case officer to speak to those images as well to assist with determining the application.
So if you would go ahead, I think it will be John on this one.
It is indeed. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't propose to say anything on this application unless members want me to go through. It's a very, very straightforward application for the uses as set out in your report. There's some physical extensions to the building and a small office. It's a use to fabricate canal barges. It's an extension of existing operation in the near vicinity. This is a primarily industrial area. It's an industrial unit. The reason that it is with this committee is because there is also a requirement for a Section 106 agreement in relation to street trees. But your officers are more than happy with the proposals subject to the conditions and that Section 106 agreement. Happy to answer questions, Chair.
Are there any questions for our planning officer? Okay, well, there being no questions, can I move that this recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Just bringing back on screen our colleagues. It's coming on screen now. I will take the vote in terms of the order of those present and visible. So first of all, Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Conception. Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Councillor Hanson. Councillor Marat.
Agreed.
And back to you, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. That is carried 8 in favour, none against, no abstentions, and we therefore have approved that application. And we'll move now to item number 11, 35 Dale Street, Liverpool 2 in Central Ward.
And could I invite Nick Surridge to address the committee, please?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Hello, Nick. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Okay, it's Nick Surridge, NS Architects. We're the acting agent for the conversion of the vacant office block into residential and commercial on the ground floor. Could you start the slideshow, please?
Just bear with us a moment. We're going to bring that on screen for you now.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the site on the corner of Dale Street and Moorfields. It's currently part grade 2 listed facade on the left hand side and wraps around up Moorfields. It's quite a prominent corner plot, which unfortunately has been vacant for some time as an old office development. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the series of elevations as they currently stand as existing. You'll see the listed part of the building on the left-hand side and the current fenestration, which is quite a sort of low-quality, poor maroon-coloured aluminium facade, which is pretty uninviting at the moment, which is the area of emphasis of our current proposals. The access to the apartments is through the listed front door on the listed facade, and we are introducing a new entrance into the commercial space on the ground floor into 2 units. Next slide, please. Okay, here you'll see the uplifted proposals. We're proposing some high quality frameless glazing on the ground floor to enhance the active frontage of the building. And we're introducing a new elevation entrance lobby into the smaller unit. So it's dividing the ground floor into 2 units and utilising the basement space for the prominent corner site for potential coffee shop use, and a new front door to the residential scheme on the left. And next slide, please. Okay, so the proposals are 20 apartments on the upper floors. They all comply with national space standards, and we comply with the accessibility number of units on the rear elevation, which are highlighted in the yellow. We are also introducing a mezzanine to the top floor, which will enable duplex apartments for the 2-bedroom apartments there. And the slides at the bottom are the ancillary spaces for the bin stores and cycle stores, and the basement utilisation for the potential coffee shop on the ground floor. And that is it. All the partitions sit comfortably within the existing mullions of the building, We work quite hard and quite closely with the conservation officer to ensure the mullion lines are as clean and crisp as possible, so there's no detriment to the current building. Next slide, please. Okay, there is some minor proposals to enable these penthouses to work, as we're looking at forming a conservation roof light Velux system into some strategic positions on the roofscape, and also introducing a dormer to the feature dome on the corner there, so you'll see an arched dormer, and that's pretty much all that's happening up to the facade. So it's very much in a sort of sympathetic scheme. Next slide, please. Here's just a series of CGIs of the client's ambition for a high quality residential development in the currently unused and unloved building, bringing it back to life. And yeah, that's pretty much all we got to say on the scheme. Any questions?
Are there any questions? No. Well, thank you for that, Nick. It does look a very sympathetic development, I must say. I do like some of the windows in the roof space personally. Can I hand over to our planning officer now, please?
Chair, thank you very much. You've got a detailed report by the officer in front of you, and you've also listened to an informative presentation today. The one issue the main issue in relation to this application is the potential loss of the building for office accommodation and its reuse for residential accommodation. Concerns have been received from the policy team within the planning department. They consider that this accommodation should be protected as office space moving forward. The building has been unoccupied since 2015. The current owner has gone to varying lengths to get reused for office accommodation to no success. You will note from the report that part of the building is listed. We are satisfied that in this instance, granting planning permission, you will secure the reuse of the building and its adaptability to a residential accommodation in appropriate location in the part of the city. Whilst we acknowledge the concern of other members of the planning department in relation to the loss of office space, in this instance we consider that that space is no longer required and should be reutilised. Chair, other issues have been addressed within the report, primarily in relation to the impact on heritage assets and residential amenity. These are addressed thoroughly within the report. This application is supported by your officers, subject to stated conditions, and the applicant entering into full section 106 in relation to contributions for open space in relation to the number of apartments and also street trees. Chair, if you have any of the members of the planning committee have any questions for myself.
Are there any questions? No? Well, in that case, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Starting with you firstly. Confirm your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Conception.
Agreed.
Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Councillor Marat.
Agreed.
Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson has now left the meeting, therefore that concludes our vote on this item. That is 8 in favour.
Come back, Michael.
Oh, welcome, Joe. Welcome, Joe. As you were absent for the majority of this item, unfortunately, I won't be able to take your vote. So, thank you. Welcome back. But the vote is 8 in favour, none against, no abstentions. Therefore, the application is approved. And we move on now to item number 12, land at the corner of Rose Place in Liverpool 3, Everton Ward. I believe, Chair, we have a number of speakers.
We have, first of all, Andrew Shane and Diane Ellis, who both wish to address the committee. So I'll invite Andrew Shane first.
If I could ask colleagues to play a presentation and display it on screen to assist the applicant and agent.
Can everyone hear me?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. It'll just be me speaking, and then Diana is registered just in case to answer any questions that might follow.
That's fine, Andrew.
Thank you. Yep, okay. So, Chair, members of the Planning Committee, thank you for allowing me to present these exciting new proposals for a student residential development in Liverpool. The application site is located on the north of Rose Place, with St Anne Street to the west and in close proximity to Project Jennifer, and a 15-minute walk to the city centre. The site is situated in an area of ongoing regeneration with numerous sites at varying stages of development progress. If you could go on to the next slide, please. Which is just demonstrated here and summarised on this slide. The current site consists of an industrial warehouse building which has been currently vacant and has been for some time. Next slide, please. Okay, so previously there's an existing planning approval for an 8-storey residential apartment development with a total of 127 apartments with studios, 1-beds and 2-beds. Unfortunately, Liverpool Foundation Homes had previously agreed to occupy this residential scheme, but that fell under the residential consent, but they pulled out of the deal, and our client Legacy had no option but to look for another use on this site. Therefore, owing to the buoyant student residential sector within the city, our client wishes to secure a new student use for this site. The proposal will be of the same scale and massing of the previous one shown here, but with a number of changes, such as removing the balconies and with additional windows to provide necessary internal requirements for the student dwellings, and the external materials and detailing of the building has been enhanced. Next slide, please. So the new proposed student residential scheme will be a development worth approximately £25 million worth of investment and create jobs and apprenticeships for the city region. It will consist of 280 student beds, including a mixture of 84 studios and 196 apartment bedrooms. The scheme benefits from generous provision of both internal and external amenity space, offering students various places to study and relax throughout the building. 40 in number flexible employment business units are provided at ground floor to cater for a variety of local companies, and 138 cycle spaces are also provided to encourage sustainable transport. Next slide, please. The slide shows the first floor plan layout with generous courtyard garden spaces with high quality landscaping access from the adjacent amenity space. Typically, a floor consists of 4 cluster apartments and 14 studios, including 2 accessible studios, which provide a total of 13 across the whole building. 8 studios are situated above the central amenity space. Next slide, please. So the image shows the proposed development from the corner of St Anne Street and Rose Place, showing the proposed materials and detailing. High quality materials are proposed, including red and grey brick, bronze coloured metal cladding, light grey masonry cladding and various glazing systems. In conclusion, this development comprises a significant investment of approximately £25 million. Our client is a local developer with a proven track record of working with local community groups to develop local labour and apprenticeship schemes, and is committed to working with the neighbouring development site project teams such as the police headquarters to explore synergies and partnerships for construction. We have listened and liaised to officer comments and concerns and amended this scheme appropriately. The development will help provide new definition along St Anne Street and help revitalise this key route to the north of the city centre, deliver new accommodation to encourage a new mix of people to the area, provide flexible local employment for business space and opportunities, and therefore I urge members to carry your officer's recommendation for approval, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, come in, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief question. With regard to changing the plan and development, did you respond to all the issues raised by the planning department?
I believe we did, yes, through quite a lengthy sort of correspondence between submitting the application and then finalising the proposals. I believe we've sort of fully answered all the concerns and comments.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Andrew? All right, so can I hand over to to Councillor Jane Corbett now, who's going to raise some objections to the scheme. Over to you, Jane.
This has changed dramatically from being residential to being student. It's a set of student blocks now. I think the committee needs to understand how the whole area works and how it's changed very rapidly from employment land to apartment blocks and the density of that. The loss of employment land is a big issue, and you'll look at those pictures and you'll think, well, it's looking pretty scrappy. Yes, it is, but there is employment opportunities in there, and it's got small warehouses that actually could be done up with investment. And if you notice, it's very clear to the city centre, which is great. The community, our community here needs to retain employment land and currently keep those industrial units, but have them up to a good standard. So obviously that means there needs to be investment there, but it's important that we keep that as employment land. And it's under that as within the UDP, although it's mixed use within the local plan, but the local plan hasn't come through yet. If you live as a resident in St Anne's Court, which you'll see on the site plan, if you go back to the site plan, is just at the bottom of that, very close. There will be overdevelopment in terms of size and scale. It's very overbearing. And the loss of light there, you're being surrounded by blocks, basically. This is now a set of student blocks. If you walk down St Anne Street into town, on the left-hand side, you'll see all the student blocks on Islington. Walk back home, and behind you, you've got student blocks at the bottom of Prince Edwin Street. And in fact, you've now got in that immediate area, you've got 804 student beds, if this goes ahead, 804 student beds and 788 residential units in that small area. It's too much. So you can see actually, yes, where it says on that one, you've got Project Jennifer up the top in purple. You can see the one where it cites. This particular development that's being put forward this morning has a lot more retail units in it. It was 25 years plus to get to a position where Project Jennifer actually opened. We don't want to undermine the retail in the area in Project Jennifer. You've got Phoenix Place, Clegg Street, Carrow, Fox Street Village, the one immediately adjacent to this particular site, which is large, and you can see it in sort of an orangey colour. And then you've also got the one right by Great Young Street Market, by Gracie Market. So we're being surrounded now, that's what it feels like, with student blocks or residential apartments. This is actually undermining the community. It's not responding to the needs of North Liverpool and Liverpool generally in terms of housing needs, and it's removing key employment land that we need. If you look at the way that the highways and parking is at the moment in the area, actually I've just Googled Great Richmond Street, which runs directly along St Anne's Court. And if you look at Great Richmond Street and you look at the visual on that, you'll see all the car parking along there. Those are narrow streets, and on the top right-hand corner. Oh, right, okay, so you go back to the site map, go down 2 blocks, and you'll see the block of St Anne's Court there, and Great Richmond Street. So you've got Rose Place, and then below that you've got Great Richmond Street. You've got massive parking problems in the area. Although the Section 106 relates to that, it will nowhere near the negativity that it will be caused by this. In the plan, I understand that this has already been passed for residential, but to be honest with you, residential will be better than what's being proposed at the moment. I don't quite work out the rationale on that one. There are other people out there that might want to take over from Liverpool Foundation homes, apparently. Planning is meant, where there's a change of use between employment land and then onto residential land, planning should act to encourage and not impede economic growth. Doing it this way with the student block will actually impede economic growth. And as I said before, it won't enhance the neighbourhood and it won't respond to housing need, particularly in north of Liverpool. And also we have enough student blocks in the area and just down the road. We don't really need any more, or we don't need any more. So that's why I'm objecting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett. Are there any questions for Councillor Corbett?
Yes, Chair. I have 2 questions.
Yes, carry on.
Thanks, Chair. Jane, I don't have the notes on me, so bear with me. I just want to ask 2 questions. Where that plot of land is now, on that plot of land, is there any economic activity at the moment?
There's some on that street, Councillor Cummings, yeah. So as you go down there, you've got some of the units on Rose Place and on Richmond Street. So if you work up that site plan that you saw before from Great Richmond Street, and then on to
I've got problems here, Jane. I've got problems hearing you. It's very muffled.
The officer can explain what's actually on that land, or Steve, is it Andrew? Sorry, Andrew could explain what's on that land at the moment.
So there is or there isn't?
So there is land, that there is usage of Rose Place there. I don't want to go into any more of that because there's links between the person who's developing and the person who owns the land.
Right.
So, Councillor Cummings, have you got any other questions directly on the points that Councillor Corbett's made?
Right. And the second question, were there any other proposals for that piece of land? As in, were there any other organisations that expressed a definite proposal to take up that piece of land?
For what?
For anything.
Okay, so it would have been helpful if you'd read the
I don't have the notes on me, remember. This
no, I know, perhaps read them before. Because what's already been agreed there by your committee was a residential scheme. And you saw the pictures before where the first pictures that Andrew showed, which included balconies, and that was residential. What you've got now is a proposal, and that was agreed by committee. What you've got now is more units, so it shifted by 128 to 280, I think it was. And you've got basically student blocks that come right out onto the edge of the pavement, so they're back of pavement. It's much more dense, and it's very little room for manoeuvre there. So you've got an existing residential planning commission that's been approved, and you've now got a change. They're now bringing to you this morning or this afternoon a change so that we're just getting a student block there. We're getting student blocks, which we already have too many of within the area.
The accommodation provider withdrew, didn't he?
No, it's the same guys. It's the same people who put forward the application. It's Legacy, John Morley, who put forward the application. What they're wanting to do is pass it on to somebody to develop. And the developer that was going to take it on, by the sounds of it, perhaps Andrew can confirm this, has withdrawn. So they've moved it from being from being residential apartments to a student block.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Same applicants, yeah.
Yes, same. So it's still legacy. Our client's still legacy development. So yeah, they're still trying to develop the site just with a different use.
Yeah, if I could come in here, I thought this was made fairly clear by the presentation that we are still with legacy, but they haven't been able to develop a residential, was my understanding from you, Andrew.
That's correct.
So they feel that they need to go forward with another option, and they're asking now for student accommodation. But if all the questions have been covered by Councillor Cummings, can I see if anybody else on the planning committee has got any questions based around Jane Corbett's objections? Otherwise, I'm going to pass over to the planning officer now.
Chair, I believe Councillor Juarez may have a question at this point.
All right, Councillor Juarez, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask why, is there a shortage of student accommodation in the area? And also, why was the application changed from residential to, to student accommodation?
I think, as sort of mentioned in the presentation, I think there was a sort of partner who was involved in the residential development that unfortunately, let me just get back, withdrew from the deal. I think, yeah, Liverpool Foundation Homes had previously agreed to occupy the site, but they've pulled out of the deal with Legacy. So on the back of that, the client is looking for a different use for the site. I think they're looking at the sort of buoyant student market and feel that that's the most appropriate sort of change of use for this development site. So still keeping it residential, but obviously altering it slightly to allow for student resi.
Okay, can I hand over, thank you very much for answering those questions. Can I hand over now to our planning officer? I think this will be John.
It is indeed, Chair, thank you. Chair, quite a number of points to pick up there, I think, particularly from Councillor Corbett, so I'll do my best to address those. Just in terms of some clarification here, this is an application, as you've heard, for the erection of a student block of between 6 and 8 stories with some commercial and retail on the ground floors. And you've had that presentation. Unfortunately, Chair, I wasn't able to see much of that presentation for technical reasons, so apologies. But I do, obviously I am familiar with the scheme, and I've got my own images from the website beside me. The proposal, as you've heard, is very similar in terms of its form, scale, footprint, massing and so on as to the previous scheme that this committee has granted. However, as you've heard, it's moved away from being a residential scheme of studio 1-bed and 2-bed flats to a scheme entirely for student accommodation. And so the main difference is obviously an increase in the overall numbers of people able to occupy that building, but also the removal of any car parking associated with it, given that it is now solely for use by students. The various changes, Chair, are set out in your agenda papers, paragraph 1.1. So again, the increase in retail floor space, removal of parking and a change to resi, and then some of the various changes to the external appearance and so on are listed in that report. Chair, obviously the principle has already been established here in terms of the use, but I think it's worthwhile just picking up on Councillor Corbett's comments. The site is indeed allocated for industrial purposes in the UDP, and your report goes through the particular issues around that allocation. The policy at the moment, E1, specifies that development should act as a catalyst and so on, and we address those points. I think the important point to note here is that the area has undergone quite significant change over recent years, moving from a primarily industrial area to one of a more mixed-use allocation. And as you've heard from Councillor Corbett, there are a number of residential schemes that have either been consented or are under construction in the immediate vicinity. That change is now reflected in the local plan, and the area has now been allocated for mixed-use purposes to reflect that change and to facilitate further similar changes moving forward. So for those reasons, Chair, we're comfortable with the principle of student development on here. In terms of the second point that Councillor Corbett's raised around the overbearing nature of it and feeling hemmed in, again, your officers have looked purposes, and given the sort of precedent that's been set by the scale and so on of previous consents, we're happy with this particular proposal in terms of the overall numbers, and we're not persuaded that it would have an adverse impact on residential amenity. Again, that's not to sort of put aside the concerns that the residents and councillors have about the area, but it is one clearly of that it's an area that is undergoing change at the moment with these types of proposal, and has already undergone some change through the previous consented schemes. In terms of parking, my colleague in Highways might be able to answer that if necessary. Suffice to say that with all student schemes, we're satisfied that car parking can be reduced to a minimum, particularly in these kind of city fringe locations, and where there are good transport and walking routes, which there are in this particular case. In terms of some of the other questions I think were raised about ownership and use of the building by Councillor Cummings, my understanding is that the applicant is Legacy Development, and that there is a connection between the developer and the current ownership of the building. In terms of its use, my understanding is that the building is used for some storage, albeit not intensively. A lot of this site is given over to car parking, but there is an operational use, and there is a connection between the ownership of the current building and the current developer, or the applicant, I should say. I'm not sure whether the applicant might want to pick up on that with your permission, Chair, later on, but that's certainly my understanding. In terms of the quantum of retail and the impact on Great Homer Street, again, your officers have looked carefully at that particular issue. We have challenged the applicant in terms of that, and we're satisfied that given the formats of those units, relatively small rather than larger units, and given their proximity to the Great Homer Street development, it would not give rise to any concerns around the sustainability of the Great Homer Street. It would not have an adverse impact in terms of its viability. I think that's all the points, Chair. Hope I've addressed them. Happy to answer any further questions that you or members may have. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the applicant, please, if possible.
This is a little bit irregular, quite honestly, Councillor Cummings.
Can
Normally these questions here are for our planning officer. You get an opportunity to ask questions at every stage in the process. Is it really necessary to go back to the applicant?
I'll explain why. It's the point raised by John. on my question of the property itself.
All right, well, I'll allow it then. If we could ask Andrew, if you can, to answer this question from Councillor Cummings, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, with regard to my question to Councillor Corbett that was raised by John, I just want to know what the situation is with your current tenants at the moment. What will happen with them if this planning application goes forward?
Are you able to answer that, Andrew?
Sorry, no, I'm unfortunately I'm not in the position to answer that question.
And you see, from my point of view as chair, and I know that I'm going to be backed up in this by our head of planning, we have to consider how a planning permission is given to a piece of land, not really be particularly influenced by who owns that land. People who even don't own a plot of land can actually apply for a planning permission on it. So I personally, I would be advised by the head of planning, but I don't see that this is actually relevant to our considerations about tenancies. So anyway, the question can't be answered by the person who's here, Councillor Cummings. Would you like me to pass it back to our planning officer to see if they can answer it?
Thank you.
Chair, I believe the head of planning is trying to come in at this juncture.
All right. Well, if she would, I'd be pleased.
Hello, hi Trish, can you hear me?
Yes,
Samantha,
carry on.
I confirm, I agree with your comments. The planning process is an objective process that's land use based. So as a planning committee, it's not before you to consider who the applicant is. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So are there any other questions about this application before we move to the vote? All right, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. If we can move to the vote, I'll take your vote first.
Agree.
Thank you, Chair. Moving next to Councillor Juarez.
Abstain.
Abstained. Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Councillor Conception.
Agreed.
Councillor Hanson.
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Councillor Marat. Councillor Marat. Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Marat, you abstaining? Just to confirm that.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agree.
Thank you, Chair. Just for purpose of clarity, vote is 7 in favour, none against, 2 abstentions, and the recommendation is therefore carried on that basis. And we move to our last item of business, number 13, in relation to number 4 Oak Terrace on Beach Street, Liverpool, 7 in Kensington and Fairfield.
Is that me, Michael?
I've recorded your abstention, Billy. For item number 13, just to note, we have no speakers registered either for, against, or on behalf of the applicant. Therefore, I'm going to ask my colleague to display some images on screen, and I would ask the case officer to comment briefly on those particular images.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I can't see the images at the moment. There's a bit of a lag. But as you can see from the report, Chair, this is simply to use the former children's home at 4 Oak Terrace as an 8-bed HMO. You'll see from the report that it's also been a listed building and there is an associate application for those various minor works. However, it should be stressed that there is no external change of any significance associated with this particular proposal. There's probably very little that I can usefully add to the many debates that has been had by this committee around HMOs, Chair. The information is set out in your agenda papers, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have on the specifics of this particular application.
Thank you, John. And are there any questions? Well, if not, then can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. If I can take Councillor Kennedy's vote first.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Conception. Councillor Cummings.
Agreed.
Councillor Juarez.
Agree.
Councillor Hanson. Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Councillor Marat.
Agreed.
Thanks, Billy. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Chair, your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. And to confirm, that is unanimous in favour of the application. The application is therefore approved on that basis. And that concludes today's items of business. Chair, if you'd like to say a few brief closing remarks.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending today. It's been very, very good, our attendance, since we've been having our virtual meetings. It was a little bit unfortunate today that we seem to have had more technical issues than we had on the last occasion. So apologies for that, but hopefully we will be able to get all of this resolved because our next planning meeting is going to follow closely on the heels of this one, and it will be next Tuesday. So we are now going to aim to have 2 planning meetings a month, but we're going to have fewer items on the agenda. So I hope that will end up being a better balance for everybody. Thanks, everyone. And if you do have any comments, please email me or phone me about them. Thank you to all our officers, and thank you to Mike.
Thank you, Chair. And that concludes today's live stream. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Niall, if you could conclude the live stream, please.